Good day to you, partner. I'm keen, and I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this forsaken cave.
Hey guys, Wheat Solo here, aka the Skeleton King. Part 2 of my Why Fire Golems Are Whack, and I'm using declone as a good way to show that there are issues with fire golems because of their design. I'm so happy, for one, let's just say this, I'm so happy fire golems are functional. That is awesome. I just think that this is an example of why there needs to be some changes in how they are made at some point. Maybe we won't get it next season, maybe the season after. In the last video, we basically ran some pretty straight mapping gear, except for 3.5 items, I believe I called it. That was my little explanation. In this video, we're going much more in the declone gear. I actually like the arachnid mesh. I would not call that standard declone gear, but basically any belt with 2 max all res is basically a good declone belt. He also gets 1 more plus skill that's going to help with lore resist and the fire golems, and some SCR. I think he's running 75 in this video. As you can see, the LR basically doesn't even last. It should last 25 frames. About. Technically more like 30, but it looks like it's hardly even lasting 25 frames. But it might be. So there's cooldowns on fire golems, there's cooldowns on bone armor. So basically he will always have time to cast lore resist. As you can see about the damage he's going to be taking, he's still taking quite a bit of damage, I believe, from the fire wave. I think all of his skills have less of a cooldown, because he was telling me he still felt like the fight was weirder than normal. And it definitely seems like there's just more going on. Also, his fire wave seems to be doing a high amount of damage. Maybe they've buffed that in recent seasons. I'm not positive about that. But did you see what just happened there? I'm sorry, I'm talking about some of the random damage. All of the ads were stuck to declone, and the fire golems were just right there, and I don't think he got hit by an ad once. Now, yeah, those are the warriors, so those are always kind of whack enemies. But here's the thing. It was basically, what's the word for it? It wasn't even like he had to think about how to deal with the ads. The fire golems just did it all for him. And in fact, having declone there probably made it easier because it gave a constant target for the fire golems to be stacked around. So one of the interesting ideas that, you know, Topwigs had about how to deal with fire golems in this fight, and it also actually, conversely, helps to affect some of the other classes that can kind of cheese ads, is to allow declone to not be invulnerable in that phase. So that means if you're having fire golems and they're stacked on top of declone, which is a pretty good place to stack your pets, and he's taking damage, he might proc into the next cold nova and the ads are still alive. At that point, it's probably a wipe, considering most things that could happen in the fight at that point, or at least it's going to be very challenging. So right now, again, he's just going to walk around in circles. The fire golems are going to take most of the range damage and all of the melee damage. So if you notice about the damage he's taking in this fight, he's basically taking almost no damage now from meteors. He is casting bone armor. I believe it's about the same amount, like 400. But basically now he has 50% PDR and 400 more health. In fact, I'm sorry, he has 49 PDR. But yeah. Basically having half PDR means the meteors are going to be going from doing like 800 damage to him in the last video, or maybe a little, I think about 800. They're probably dealing about 500 to 400 damage to him right now. Probably more like 500 depending on the bone armor. So that basically means instead of having to use a Jube, he doesn't have to. He won't die by anything else. Also, as you can see, he's definitely like a machine gun with these mechanics. Yeah, he's actually crazy non-ladder. I wonder why that is. Anyways, so how do we fix fire golems besides declone taking damage and making it more chaotic to use him as a centering force to group all of the summoned skeletons? Well, as you can see, their damage is actually pretty good still. He's going to show the fire golem numbers. I think he lost about 1,000 on each golem, maybe a little more. But here's the thing, by the way, that was standing on a bone spirit patch and he just got smashed. If we change the damage of fire golems to be much more based around mastery and pierce, then gear like this will not do nearly as well. If we allow fire golems to be more basically based around the synergies, or more based around basic gear choices, then this would be an option. So when Senpai basically overhauled them very quickly after some of the problems that fire golems had initially, he removed pierce, he took Fire Master away from Trangs, and he basically buffed all of the synergies quite a bit on Fire Golems, and I think buffed Fire Golems themselves a little bit. So basically you could argue they're like a 80-point max Golem Wonder build, right? You just put a bunch of points in them, and they're pretty good. Now obviously Mastery helps a bunch, and Skillers help a bunch, and you will not do well without more. But when it comes to a fight like Declone, where, especially early on, survivability is one of the most key mechanics, having an ad that deals damage, and deals pretty good damage, even wearing budget, well, this isn't budget, wearing tanky gear, I apologize, none of this is budget. I don't know, maybe One Piece is like kind of budget, but yeah. Being able to wear tanky gear and do a lot of damage, okay, so he just walked in front of most of his fire golems, and did you see that he actually, like, took damage for a second from the ads? Like, right now, he's not worried about anything but, like, meteors and Declone, who is actually an animal non-ladder. This is actually blowing my mind. So, I would think this. When you're talking about how summoners function in Identity, they are quite often a skill-based build that doesn't cost much. And that is fine. So many people enjoy that about summoners. If we can have more summoner builds that are expensive, I think it would be better for a fight like Declone, where right now being able to just use about any piece of gear makes the fight much easier, so that would be budget or in-game. If we can transition fire golems to being that one, the only expensive summoner build in the game, like, let's look at it this way. What is the most expensive summoner build? Like, even using an Infinity Iron Golem. It's about 50 high runes plus. You're like, oh, that's expensive. And an Infinity Iron Golem? Wow, eat solo. That seems fine to me. Okay. All the other expensive builds in the game, like, start at 100 high runes. Okay? You don't know how expensive some builds get, because they just require so much more specific pieces of gear than a summoner would ever have to worry about. Like, a summoner worries about +1 skills and 2 sockets. Like, certain builds worry about, like, ED rolls on a craft that they're never going to find except once in a goddamn season. Or a 3-socket Tyrael's Might. That's probably going to cost, even like the worst 3-socket Tyrael's Might is probably going to be 70 high runes plus as of right now. So that's why summoners are kind of annoying in a sense, is you can just make them for so cheap. And I'm not saying let's get rid of that, okay? Like, yes, your summoner that you built is probably more expensive than most people playing PD2. But to compare it to any of the actual expensive builds to make in the game does an unjust service to yourself and the other build. If fire golems could be transitioned to be based around pierce, mastery, and gear that's not just plus skills, right? So you need to worry about sockets, you need to worry about a mastery core, a pierce core, all that sort of stuff, then we can have an actual summoner that could actually cost something. So instead of having a 10 high rune like tax on an Infinity Iron Golem, because you have an optimal summoner which can actually sub 6 ROB very cheaply and efficiently, we could actually have maybe a summoner build that could cost, like, you know, standard 50 plus high runes to make, not just like one random summoner ever made by me and Topwug. It would help this fight, and I think it would help summoners in general get rid of this little... There's a stigma against summoners that I don't enjoy, which is like, why would I do more? I don't need to. I don't know. Don't you want to do more with everything in your life? Well, I think I kind of explained fire golems why they've been nerfed or changed, and why they should probably still be, maybe not nerfed, okay, no one's gonna like that. They should still be changed. Skelly King out, guys. GG.
Come and play with us, Danny.